My daughter. Please, help me.
Do not ever call me your daughter! Look at you, crawling like an animal! You pushed me down without mercy. Twice. The ground will rise to meet you, same way you pushed me down, when you least expected.
The sound echoed through the compound like thunder splitting wood. Adaeze lay on the bare floor, her legs twisted beneath her in a way legs were never meant to twist.
Adaeze,
Her mother's scream tore through the night
my
air.
child.
Her father stood
has
frozen
happened
at
to
the
you?
doorway, a lamp shaking in his trembling hand. And as the women of the compound rushed in one after another, gasping, covering their mouths, whispering among themselves, only one thought lived in Adaeze's fading mind. The old woman's voice, still echoing, still warning her, "You pushed me down without mercy. Now the ground will rise to meet you the same way." She did not understand it then. She would understand it soon. My beautiful viewers, before we continue this emotional journey filled with deep lessons, kindly subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Your support means everything to this channel. And now, come with me deeper into this story of pride, punishment, and the long road back to humility. In the quiet farming town of Umuoji, where the harvest season brought both joy and gossip in equal measure, there lived a couple whose home had been empty of laughter for far too long. Chidinma had been married to Obiora for 9 years without a single child to call her own. The women at the market spoke cruelly behind cupped hands. "That one's womb has refused to open," they whispered. "Maybe she offended the ancestors," others said. Every month, Chidinma's hope rose. Every month, it fell again like a leaf in the dry season wind. Obiora never raised his voice against her. Even when his own mother pressed him to take a second wife, he simply held his wife's hand in the dark and whispered, "We will wait together." And then, after 9 long years of waiting, weeping, and praying beneath the Iroko tree at dawn, Chidinma's belly finally began to swell. The whole town celebrated as though a king had been born. When the child arrived, a girl with skin like polished mahogany and eyes that sparkled even in lamplight, Obiora named her Adaeze, the daughter of a king. From the day she opened her eyes, Adaeze was treated like something too precious to touch the ground. No second child ever came. And so all the love that 9 empty years had stored up poured into one single child, with no discipline to hold it steady. If Adaeze cried, she was given whatever she wanted before her tears even finished falling. If she refused her food, a sweeter dish was prepared. If another child dared to offend her, Obiora would march to that child's house and shout at the parents until the whole street gathered to watch. "Leave my daughter," Chidinma would say whenever anyone tried to correct her. "She is still small. She will grow out of it." But Adaeze did not grow out of it. She grew into it. By the time Adaeze turned 16, her beauty was spoken of in 3 neighboring villages. Young men found reasons to walk past her father's compound just to catch a glimpse of her. Old women blessed her without being asked, hoping some of that beauty would rub off on their own grandchildren through sheer proximity. But beneath that beauty, something had hardened. The first sign came on a market afternoon when an elderly trader accidentally brushed against Adese's basket. "Watch where you are going, old fool," she snapped, loud enough for the whole market row to hear. The trader simply lowered her head and apologized, though she had done no wrong. The second sign came weeks later. A younger girl, barely 10 years old, complimented Adaeze's wrapper shyly. Adaeze looked her up and down and laughed. "Keep your dusty compliments. You could never afford to dream of looking like me." The child ran home in tears. The third sign came during a town meeting when an elder corrected Adaeze publicly for interrupting the proceedings. "You are too old to be useful here anyway," Adaeze said flatly, turning her back on him in front of the entire gathering. The square fell into stunned silence. People complained to her parents constantly, but Obiora always waved it away. "She is still young. She will change." She did not change. She only grew louder, prouder, and crueler with each passing season. There was only one person in Umuoji who remained close to Adaeze, despite everything: her childhood friend, Neka. Where Adaeze was sharp-tongued, Neka was gentle. Where Adaeze mocked, Neka apologized on her behalf. Where Adaeze pushed people away, Neka quietly stayed. "Adaeze," Neka said one evening as they walked home from the farm, baskets balanced on their heads, "the way you treat people will bring you trouble one day." Adaeze stopped walking and turned sharply. "Do not lecture me, Neka. You sound like my mother." "I only worry for you," Neka said softly. Pride has a way of inviting punishment it never expected. Adaeze laughed, the kind of laugh that carried no warmth in it. "What punishment? Look at me. Nobody touches me. Nobody corrects me. Nothing happens to me." That sentence frightened Nika more than anything Adaeze had ever said, because in that moment, she understood that Adaeze truly believed herself untouchable. One blistering afternoon, the water pots inside Obiora's compound stood empty, and Chidinma's voice rang out tiredly across the yard. "Adaeze, go to the stream and fetch water for the house." From inside her room, Adaeze groaned loudly. "Why can't the house girl do it? We have no house girl today. Please, just this once." Adaeze hissed and dragged her feet toward the door, complaining the entire way. Neka, arriving just then with her own pot balanced on her hip, offered gently, "I will go with you." The two girls walked the familiar path toward the stream, the afternoon sun pressing heavily against their skin. But as they drew closer to the water, something felt wrong. No birds called from the trees. No women's laughter carried on the breeze. No clatter of clay pots knocking together. Even the wind itself seemed to hold its breath. "This place feels strange today," Neka whispered, slowing her pace. Adaeze rolled her eyes. "You are afraid of everything." Then they saw her. An old, crippled woman knelt weakly by the narrow footpath beside the stream, her back bent like a question mark, one leg dragging uselessly beside her. An empty clay pot sat at her side. She was trying to rise to her feet, both hands braced against the earth, struggling against the weight of her own body. Neka's heart softened instantly. "Let me help you, grandmother." But Adaeze grabbed her wrist. "Wait! Watch me! Adaeze, please don't!" The old woman lifted her head and smiled with relief the moment she saw Adaeze approaching. "My daughter," she said weakly, stretching out a trembling hand. "Please help me to my feet." The words, "my daughter," struck something dark in Adaeze's chest. Without a word, Adaeze reached down as though to help her rise. Then, with a slow, deliberate smile, she shoved the old woman's shoulder hard, sending her crashing back down into the dirt. The old woman gasped sharply, her body folding awkwardly against the packed earth. "Adaeze!" Neka screamed in horror. "Do not ever call me your daughter," Adaeze said coldly. "Look at you, crawling in the dirt like an animal." The old woman tried to push herself upright again, trembling with effort. Before she could fully rise, Adaeze placed her foot against the woman's frail shoulder and pushed her back down a second time, harder than the first. This time, the old woman's head struck the ground and she lay still for a moment, dazed. Neka rushed forward immediately, kneeling beside her. "What is wrong with you?" she cried angrily. "Please forgive her, grandmother." She gently helped the old woman sit upright, brushing the dirt and leaves from her trembling arms. The old woman stared at Neka for a long, quiet moment. "You are kind," she finally said. "You will see goodness all your days." Adaeze burst into mocking laughter. "Look at you, blessing someone when your own life is already so miserable." The wind shifted suddenly, sharp and cold, despite the afternoon heat. The old woman's eyes lifted toward Adaeze, and they were no longer the eyes of a tired old woman. They were deep, dark, and endless, like wells with no bottom. "You pushed me down without mercy, twice, while I begged only for your hand," she said, her voice no longer trembling, but low and ancient. "So the ground itself will rise to meet you the same way, when you least expect it." The trees along the bank bent sideways, though no storm was near. Neka froze where she knelt. Adaeze only scoffed. "Mad old woman." She turned and walked away without looking back. The old woman did not call after her. She simply watched her go, silent, until she disappeared from sight. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing happened. Adaeze forgot the stream entirely, the way one forgets a dream by midday. "You see," she told Neka one evening, twirling a strand of her own hair, "nothing came of that old woman's noise." Neka said nothing, but the unease never left her chest. Some nights, she dreamed of cold, dark eyes staring out from beneath the water, watching, waiting, patient as a season. One evening, dark clouds rolled low across Umuoji, and the air turned heavy and still. Inside the house, Chidinma was arranging baskets near the doorway. "Adaeze," she called, "bring that lamp closer for me." From her room, Adaeze answered lazily, "What is it now?" Just bring the lamp, Adaeze hissed and stood, walking toward the door without looking down. Her foot caught suddenly against the raised edge of the doorway, a small ridge of packed earth she had crossed 1,000 times before without trouble. Her body twisted violently, thrown forward by a force that felt almost like a hand against her back. Crack! A scream tore from her throat and filled the whole compound. Chidinma dropped the baskets immediately. Obiora rushed from the back room in a panic. Both parents froze in horror at the sight of their daughter sprawled motionless on the ground, blood trickling slowly from her temple. Adaeze, Chidinma screamed, falling beside her. My child, my child. Neighbors poured into the compound from every direction, drawn by the screaming. The proud girl who once walked through Umuoji like a queen now lay broken on the cold earth like a discarded doll, the very same way she had once left an old woman lying. That same night, the village healer was summoned urgently. He examined her in silence, his face growing darker with every passing second. What is it? Chidinma begged. The healer sighed heavily. Her spine is broken. Chidinma collapsed to the floor, wailing. Obiora gripped the old man's shoulders desperately. Please, save my daughter. The healer explained gently that the road ahead would be long and painful. Her beautiful hair would have to be shaved for treatment. Bitter herbs would be rubbed into her back daily. And then, his voice dropped lower. She may never walk again. The same girl who shoved a crippled woman into the dirt could no longer lift herself from her own mat. The same girl who laughed at someone else's fall now cried herself hoarse every evening, staring at her thinning reflection in a clay bowl of water. I am ugly now, she wept one night.
It's okay.
Everything I had is gone. Neka sat beside her, holding her trembling hand.
It's okay.
No,
to cry.
she whispered. You are still here. That is something. But quietly, in her heart, Neka remembered the old woman's words by the stream, and a slow, cold fear crept back into her chest. Weeks passed with no improvement. Different healers came and went, bringing herbs, rituals, chants, none of it working. Adaeze only grew weaker. One evening, as Chidinma sat weeping quietly by her daughter's mat, Neka finally found the courage to speak. There is something I never told you, she said softly. Chidinma looked up immediately. What is it, my daughter? Neka took a deep breath and told her everything. The stream, the crippled woman, the 2 cruel shoves that left her in the dirt, and finally, every word of the old woman's warning. As she spoke, Chidinma's face turned pale as ash. Obiora, standing nearby, went completely still, as though the air itself had left his lungs. For the first time, both parents understood that their daughter's suffering had not come from nowhere. It had come from somewhere they themselves had planted, season after season, indulgence after indulgence. Chidinma broke into fresh tears. This is our doing, she whispered. We raised her to believe she could do anything and answer to no one. The next morning, Obiora and Chidinma hurried to the home of the village Dibia. an old man whose eyes seemed to carry the weight of generations. He listened without interrupting, then closed his eyes for a long while before speaking.
Your daughter was tested by the woman of the earth at the stream, but she failed the test.
Chidinma's whole body trembled. She was a spirit of the earth, testing the hearts of those who passed through her domain. Your daughter failed that test, and failed it cruelly, twice over. He looked directly at the grieving parents. You spoiled this child until pride grew roots inside her heart. You protected her from every correction life tried to offer. So now, life is correcting her in a language she cannot ignore. Obiora dropped to his knees, weeping openly. What can we do, Dibia? Tell us. We will do anything. The old man sighed. You must return to the stream, all of you. You must beg with true hearts, not performance. Only mercy, freely given back, can undo what mercy refused once did. The next morning arrived heavy with mist and quiet dread. Obiora and Chidinma carried Adaeze gently between them, her body too weak to walk the path on her own. Neka followed close behind, her steps slow and solemn. No one spoke the entire journey. When they reached the stream, the old woman was there once more, exactly where they had first seen her, as though time itself had folded back to that very afternoon. Neka fell to her knees first. Chidinma and Obiora followed immediately after, pressing their foreheads to the damp earth. Please forgive our daughter, Chidinma sobbed. We failed her as parents. We loved her without teaching her how to carry that love properly. We are the ones truly at fault, Kurinsma. Weak and trembling, Adaeze lifted her head as far as her broken body would allow. Tears streamed freely down her thin face. I am sorry, she whispered. I pushed you down when you only asked for my hand. Please forgive me. The old woman studied them all in silence for a long, heavy moment. Then, finally, she spoke. When parents refuse to correct a child, the world steps in to correct that child instead. Her gaze moved slowly to Chidinma. You loved her without limits, and limits are what love needs to survive. Then she turned to Adaeze. A hand that refuses to lift another will one day beg to be lifted itself. The stream fell utterly silent. Even the water seemed to pause its flow. At last, the old woman sighed, and something in the air softened. I forgive you. A strange calm swept over the stream's surface. The wind, once sharp and cold, turned gentle and warm. Then, slowly, Adaeze felt something stir in her legs. A tingling, a warmth, a strength she had not felt in months. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Carefully, shakily, she pressed her palms into the earth and pushed herself upward. Chidinma screamed with joy. Obiora burst into tears, clutching his wife. Neka covered her mouth, unable to believe what she was witnessing. Adaeze rose to her feet, trembling but standing, truly standing, for the first time in months. She fell forward instead toward the old woman, sobbing, "Thank you, thank you." But when she lifted her head again, the old woman was gone, vanished completely, leaving nothing behind but the soft, steady sound of the stream flowing on, as it always had, as it always would. From that day forward, Umuoji watched a transformation no one could have predicted. The proud girl who once refused even to sweep her own compound now woke before sunrise to fetch water without complaint. She cooked beside her mother in the kitchen, learning recipes she had once dismissed as beneath her. She bowed respectfully to every elder she passed, no matter how slowly they walked or how worn their wrappers were, and never once passed an elder struggling to rise without offering her hand first. She went from house to house across the village, apologizing personally to every single person she had once wronged. "Please forgive me," she would say. One quiet evening, as the cool night breeze drifted through the compound, Adaeze took Neka's hand. "You never left me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Even when I gave you every reason to." Neka smiled gently. "That is what true friendship is. It stays when staying is hardest." Tears filled Adaeze's eyes, because for the first time in her life, she understood that the people she had once overlooked were the very ones who had carried her through her darkest season. Years later, Adaeze became known throughout Umuoji and the neighboring villages, not for her beauty, but for her wisdom. She taught young girls about humility. She warned parents gently against the very mistake her own had made. She told her story openly, without shame, wherever she was invited to speak. One quiet afternoon, she returned to the same stream where everything had changed. There, struggling on the footpath beside the water, was an elderly woman who had stumbled, unable to lift herself back to her feet. Without a single moment of hesitation, Adaeze rushed forward, kneeling beside her with a warm, genuine smile. "Grandmother, give me your hand." She lifted the old woman gently to her feet, steadying her carefully until she was sure her balance had returned. Nearby, Neka watched quietly, smiling with quiet pride at the woman her friend had become.
You are too kind.
As the afternoon light settled softly over the stream, Adaeze's voice carried gently into the evening air. "A hand that lifts another costs nothing, but a hand that pushes someone down can cost you everything."